Hello everyone, welcome again to the channel. Today I want to share with you this article that I found very interesting, and is dealing with the state of Israel and the Jewish people and prophecies. So that's kind of the summary of it, and it is very interesting, especially the first part that I'm going to mention, because he's talking about a prophecy that I somehow never heard about. So basically, they are saying that former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak said that he was afraid that Israel will disintegrate before the 80th anniversary of its 1948 establishment. Throughout the Jewish history, the Jews did not rule for more than 80 years, except in the two kingdoms of David and the Hasmonean dynasty, and in both periods their disintegration began in the 8th decade. And then there was Netanyahu, who said Netanyahu had then warned that the Hasmonean kingdom, also known as the Maccabees, had merely survived for 80 years before it was conquered by the Romans in 63 BCE. The Hasmonean state lasted only 80 years, and we need to accept this. Netanyahu said that he had reportedly vowed to ensure Israel will surpass the Maccabees' 80 years and survive for 100 years. The difference between Barak and Netanyahu's statement is quite negligible. The former's views are supposedly historical, and the latter's are biblical. Israel's survival is at stake, the existential threat is real, and the end of Israel is only a matter of time. Predictions regarding Israel's grim future are not confined to the country's political elites. One of Israel's most respected mainstream historians, Benny Morris, says Morris was not sending warning signal, but stating what to him seemed an unavoidable outcome of the country's political and demographic evolution. And pay attention to what he was saying. He was saying, I don't see how we get out of it. Already today there are more Arabs than Jews between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. The whole territory is unavoidably becoming one state with an Arab majority. Israel still calls itself a Jewish state, but a situation in which we rule an occupied people that has no rights cannot persist in the 21st century. Most predictions, while remaining committed to the racial fantasy of a Jewish majority, were far more articulate and also realistic. He once regretted that Israel's founder David Ben-Gurion did not expel all of Palestine's native population in 1947-48. In a matter of a generation, Israel will cease to exist in its current form. And then he says, Palestine was colonized by Zionists with the help of Britain, also based on biblical frames of reference. It was populated by Zionist settlers based on biblical references, dedicated to the restoration of ancient kingdoms and the return of ancient peoples to their supposedly rightful promised land. The most sinister expression of this truth is the fact that the current support of Israel by millions of Christian fundamentalists in the West is largely driven by messianic end of the world prophecies. And then we will talk more about that in a second. Since Israel has always defined itself as a Jewish state, its future is mostly linked to its ability to maintain a Jewish majority in historic Palestine. This pipe dream is now crumbling as the demographic war is clearly and quickly being lost. Coexistence in a single democratic state, it was like the possibility, the alternative, but for Israel's Zionist ideologues, such a state will hardly meet the minimum expectations of the country's founders, since it would no longer exist in the form of a Jewish Zionist state. Israel will not exist as a Jewish state for much longer. Speaking strictly in terms of demographics, Israel is no longer a Jewish majority state. So that was the summary of what they're saying. It was interesting. I just never heard about this 80 years situation, historical situation. So that was surprising to me, but what it wasn't surprising was the fact about Christian Zionism and all this. For those of you who don't know, this is an article from Wikipedia. So you'll need to verify the sources. If you trust the sources, then you will take it as a reliable source or not, and that's up to you to decide. So they're talking about Christian Zionism is a belief among some Christians that the return of the Jews to the Holy Land and the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 were in accordance with Bible prophecy. And they say some Christian Zionists believe that the gathering of the Jews in Israel is a prerequisite for the second coming of Jesus. That, let's see what else they were saying, highlighted here. It's a long article, so you can peruse it and try to find what is more relevant to you, but I wanted to highlight one part here. Oh yes, here. So this is kind of the biblical excuse to defend the state of Israel, no matter what they do, no matter if it's just or unjust, it doesn't matter. Those who curse you will be cursed, and those who bless you will be blessed. And then they go on saying that Martin Luther King Jr. was also a supporter of Israel and Zionism. And they say here, this is kind of funny in a very ridiculous way. They say the government of Israel has given official encouragement to Christian Zionism, allowing the establishment in 1980 of the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem. The embassy has raised funds to help finance Jewish immigration to Israel from the former Soviet Union and has assisted Zionist groups in establishing Jewish settlements in the West Bank. So that's something else. They say they remain elect of God, and without the Jewish nation, his redemptive purposes for the world will not be completed. So this is what they are saying. Here they were saying something else. Let's see. And this is about public opinion, and they say that in 2017 was a poll, and the United States say that 80% of evangelical Christians believe that the creation of Israel in 1948 was a fulfillment of biblical prophecy that will bring about Christ's returns, and more than 50% of evangelical Christians believe that they support Israel because it's important for fulfilling the prophecy. According to the Pew Research Survey in 2003, more than 60% of the evangelical Christians and about 50% of blacks agreed that the existence of Israel fulfilled biblical prophecy. About 50% of poll respondents says that the Bible was the biggest influence for supporting Israel, which is 11 times this amount of people who said church was the biggest influence. So this really is significant, and some people say many of the presidents have this kind of a belief. Half of evangelicals support Israel because they believe it is important for fulfilling end times prophecy. This article is also quite long, but I also want to mention a few things, not everything. It says, but most importantly, God gave Jerusalem and the rest of the Holy Land to the Jewish people. The tenet of the Christian Zionism is that God's promise of the Holy Land to the Jews is eternal, is not just something in antiquity. When we talk about the Holy Land, God's promise of the Holy Land, we're talking about the real state on both sides of the Jordan River. So the sense of a greater Israel and expansionism is really important to this community. Jerusalem is just central to that. It is viewed as a historical and biblical capital. Okay, so this is what they're saying. Now, my opinion is that this is very nonsensical, absurd, in my opinion. Because if they're going to take everything in the Bible in the most strict way, interpretation, everything in a literal way, in a literal sense, I don't understand why will anyone want to become a Christian. If trying to be a little bit cynical, if you want to become this kind of Christian Zionist, you believe that, okay, the Jews are supposed to go back before Christ comes. Why do you want Christ to come? No, only the Jews are going to be saved. Didn't you read the Bible? Only 12,000 people from each of the 12 tribes of Israel will be saved. They don't mention anyone else, so only the Jews will be saved. So why will anyone want to become Christian? It's absolutely absurd and has really no sense whatsoever. That's my opinion. I know it's a controversial topic, but I thought it is very serious for a lot of people, even politicians. So let's see what is this going to end with. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section of the video, and as always, I ask you to please like this video, share it in social media, subscribe to the channel. I hope to see you again very soon, and thank you for watching.